Hey everyone, welcome to the Paid Forward Society, the podcast where we explore the many facets of leadership as we talk to inspiring managers, entrepreneurs, coaches, veterans, and athletes who empower their teams and deliver results. Together, we discover the keys to success through empathy, purpose, and care. I'm your host, Romain Jourdan, and today I am in London. I am honored to welcome Steve Cuss on the show, a remarkable figure in the gaming industry. With nearly 3 decades of experience, Steve, you have gained invaluable insights that now you share as a consultant. You are the founder of the Game Plan Consultancy, where you provide executive expertise. You are also the host of the Liberated Leadership Interview Series, a podcast featuring inspiring leaders from diverse backgrounds. Steve, your story is one of resilience and transformation.
Yeah, that's right.
In 2012, you faced significant changes when you took a 3-month hiatus due to stress-induced depression caused by a toxic work environment. Today, we will delve into your leadership journey, both before and after that defining moment. We will explore the action you took and the lessons you learned, which ultimately led you to transform the company into the best place to work in 2017.
Over multiple years, actually. I've won that award every year since it's existed, over the last 6 years at Criterion. Yes, that was great.
In addition, Steve, you have shared your extensive knowledge and experience on numerous global platforms. As an international speaker, you have presented at conferences in London, Manaus, Kiev, and San Francisco. Your latest achievement is the upcoming release of this highly anticipated book, Liberated Leadership Lessons Learned from 20 Years Producing Video Games at EA, set to be published in summer 2023.
Yeah, summer, maybe early autumn. We'll see how we get on with that publishing process. But yeah, that's the target.
Leaders, join us for this enriching conversation as we delve into the mind of Steve Cuss, listening to his fascinating experiences, learning valuable lessons on leadership.
So usually, this is my intro here, but
understanding
what I like to do is really to
let
forward my guests introduce
empower
themselves,
the next
because
generation of leaders.
beyond the etiquette, beyond the titles, it's always great to hear who is the person behind the mic.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's interesting. How do you just
always
sum
great to
yourself up in something?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I think and actually leave. It's interesting. How do you just sum yourself up? It's something our identities are, and actually leaving Electronic Arts recently has made me realize how much I did have my identity wrapped up in my job title, as many of us do, and quite liberating to move beyond that. But with liberation comes fear as well, and those two things always go hand in hand, and I would imagine we'll talk about that quite a bit today. But I would say that when I was writing the book, actually I went right back to my childhood and my adolescence, and it's obvious to me that I can't help but lead, or perhaps more accurately, I can't help but take responsibility for things. And for me, that first manifested itself, obviously, I had a big passion for team sports growing up: football, cricket, athletics, basketball. And I always became the captain of those teams. You know, the teacher was selecting the captain, of course. And I just was that sort of child and teenager who put their hand up to take responsibility for things. And I think when you're a child, you think everyone thinks like you, don't you? So you think, well, everyone will be doing this. And then as you get older, you realize that isn't natural. And so, for example, I've done jury duty multiple times, 4 or 5 times. I've always been the chairman of the jury because I can't help it. I did try once to not volunteer myself. I only lasted about 30 seconds, and then I put my hand up as I could feel no one.
Why that? I mean, is that because of a strong breakout, or because
I know I'll be the person feeding back?
You have this instinct of leading people, and you are trying to animate and be the MC for some of the discussion, like a breakout, or what?
I guess mostly, I think I have a strong need. So if you take that example of, the situation, we'll go to workshop. I think it's most, I think I have a strong need. So if you take that example of, the classic situation where you go to a workshop and some people know each other, some people don't. And then at some point, the facilitator breaks you out into groups of 3 or 4 and says, you go and think of this and then come back and share your ideas. I usually sense in that there's a sense of panic amongst other people, that they don't want to be the person who is sharing back to the group. And in that situation, I want to relieve that pain and anxiety for them very strongly. So I have the instinct of people that's going on for them, and then this sort of strong desire to relieve that for them. And so there's that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, I am an outgoing extrovert as well, so I get my energy from being with other people, and I love that experience. I joke that I always looking for a bigger audience all the time. But if you're naturally an introvert, you're going to find that opposite. That's going to cost you a lot of energy. So I'll come away from public speaking or presenting to facilitating a workshop highly energized. So I had a sort of a fairly fundamental need and a bit of a reward loop for taking on that responsibility. So I think that's that kind of inevitably led me into a lot of the leadership roles. And then I'm a big believer that what you get in any situation is what you expect to get. That's the most likely thing to happen in any. And then I just come to expect it then to take the lead. So in the first job I went into the team leader position,
but
and then from there,
do you need to be an extrovert to be a leader?
Leadership positions?
No, not at all.
So I think that's where it comes from. Many very successful introverted leaders,
but
I do think it's interesting to think about introverted. No, not at all. Very many very successful introverted leaders, and I do think it's interesting to think about introvert extrovert with an extra dimension as well. So I said I'm an outgoing extrovert, but you can be outgoing or reserved. There's a separate access to introvert and extrovert. So you can be an outgoing introvert, which is going to be interesting. It's going to be quite tiring because you're likely to want to connect. You'll be predisposed to connect often, but it'll cost you energy. So you'll have to probably ration yourself in that situation. You can be a reserved extrovert. So you get your energy from being with other people, but you don't naturally seek it out, or it doesn't come naturally to you. So you may be, you find partners or teams that will lead you into the forums you need for getting your energy. Equally, reserved introvert, you will probably have to force yourself into those situations.
No, but I think what is
all
true,
work.
I mean,
and there's
what people may
to look out
envision
for,
as leaders or those extroverts, so people that are very outgoing and can be loud, and because they want to be on. I mean, they get their energy from others, and so I think I am more on the outgoing introvert, because I love doing this type of exercise and going on stage at presentation, but then my energy is drained. I mean, I'm not good at all. I really need to recharge, and I say, yeah. My energy is in this world of hybrid work. There's all kinds of things to think about. Yeah. So be deliberate about the recharge. Then is the key thing to that. And in this world of hybrid work, there's all kinds of things to think about how you would design the rhythm of a week now to favor all 4 quadrants of those things. Yeah.
But as an outgoing extrovert, the thing to be mindful of, I think, and certainly the case for me, is becoming the spokesperson for everything and everyone. Because that's quite dangerous, because you might not necessarily be the spokesperson for all of the views. You might necessarily condone all of the views you're the spokesperson for. So it's important to be deliberate
it makes sense.
about
So going back to the question of your introduction, so you are an outgoing extrovert.
And rationing yourself, I would say, in that. Leadership roles, and then
going back to the question of your introduction, so you are an outgoing.
Yes, so that was, so I found I naturally fell into all of these leadership roles, and then the first company I joined out of university, or actually at university I did, my degree was computer science and drama, which don't naturally go together, I don't think, but that's another thing with me. I've always had that intersection of science and arts, and kind of been on the cusp and been interested in both of those. So, for example, in my degree for my final year drama, I did how would a treatment of how Hamlet could be set in a virtual reality environment, which was interesting because I couldn't experience virtual reality at that point. There's only about 4 headsets in the world, so I had to do it from an academic point of view. And then for the drama side, I did a computerized lighting desk as the project as well. So I found the crossover, and I didn't know I was inadvertently training myself for the video game industry, which is where science and art meets in, I think, the most interesting way right now. But when I graduated, well, I'd actually learned to program when I had a year out working for IBM in between A-levels and university, and I had software engineering jobs through university. So I actually went to work for a company that made air traffic control simulators for a year, learned C++ while I was working for them, and then moved into the games industry, which is what I really wanted to do. But even doing that, I inevitably became, like a small team leader. And then when I joined this startup in London called Intelligent Games, there's a whole group of us all in our 20s. And there was must have been about 20, 25 of us. I went away on my honeymoon after I'd been there for only a few months. And when I returned, I found that most of the company had left and formed another startup just down the road. So I then became, with my 6 months experience, like the third most experienced person in the company. And then a few years after that, we did a management buyout of the founder, and I ran that as a director for 7 years. But I was 23 or 24 when we did the MBO, and absolutely no clue what I was
as a leader or as
by failing rapidly and learning from those mistakes, and learning from those around me. As a leader, yes, and as a director of the company. And that then set in path the next 30 years where I would always be the oldest and the most experienced person, even though my experience at the start was very short.
Give me examples.
So it was a real
what type of failures?
Learning as I went, very much so. And like I said, lots of failures along the way. And that, so certainly, I remember one time, like really early on, one of the first time I ever gave someone feedback. Actually, I wasn't giving someone feedback. I was giving one of our managers some feedback on one of the people that he was managing. And I said, look, here's some things I've observed, and you maybe want to give some feedback on this aspect of this individual's work or that.
Directly.
And he did it. And then 10 minutes later, the individual came to see me in the office and said, if you've got anything to say about me or any feedback from me, give me that feedback directly. And I went, oh yeah, of course I will. And he left. So then I thought,
because the manager said, okay, so Steve said, told me, to
him that I would do that. That would be one example. Yeah, the coaching should actually be to the individual. Look, if you're going to give someone feedback based on what I've said, you have to own it. And that remains true, obviously. But, these is guys in their 20s, because it was all guys at that stage. I didn't stay that way for long, which was good. Just learning everything about people management, about video game development, all together and just trying to stay sort of one step ahead of the needs of the business. Sometimes that meant only being a day ahead or learning it literally as you were doing it. And did that for 7 years. And we were always working with Electronic Arts as well. We always had at least one Electronic Arts game in development.
Like FIFA.
And I didn't realize now what an amazing opportunity some of the franchises I'm working on. And like FIFA, I went out to work on FIFA just ahead of the Japan
Have you
World
seen
Cup,
some of the players?
For
the motion pictures and everything.
And met that team and found out how they were set up. That was amazing and really interesting. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, then on my EA career, I would obviously go back quite frequently, and the whole studio in Burnaby is just an astonishing video game development facility and location, and just full of talented developers and amazing capture studios, and just world class going on there. Yeah, so worked on FIFA, worked on a Sims game, and meeting like amazing people who were absolute industry visionaries, like White. We were working on, and then we also got to work with lots of other brands. We made an Action Man game, for example. We made games for the BBC using the Tweenies license. We could move so quickly. The projects would be 3-4 months, and with teams of 5 or 6 for a few $100,000, and the last one would have been tens of millions with 300-400 people. It's huge scale on multiple platforms. So it's been a big transformation. Back in those days, though, the opportunities for learning and to go straight into the lead, because the very opposite of a glass ceiling, was phenomenal. So it was a phenomenal learning journey. But there is always dark and light in every situation, yin and yang. And the downside of that amazing opportunity is there was no mentorship. There was no experienced person in our own company or other companies that could just say, put your hand on your shoulder and go, Steve, you're making a terrible mistake. You're doing this all wrong. There's such an easier way than what you're doing. Or say, have you realized this is the effect of the decisions you're making? None of that. So all sort of self-discovery and self-learning to a large extent. And I think that's part of the big reason for wanting to set up the Game Plan consultancy now, is to provide that for some of the new studios who are coming out, the new studio leaders that are proliferating in the amazing games industry, but also take some of the rapid learning that's gone on from me personally over the last 30 years and apply it to other industries as well, because it has been phenomenal. But yes, we're still not through the intro yet, are we? So 7 years of running that company, very much a cash flow driven company. Sometimes spirits really high, sometimes on the verge of bankruptcy. Eventually we signed a deal with a publisher who went bankrupt themselves, and that took us down as well, because they owed us money that there's clearly we were never going to make, never receive. So we knew then at that point, we're not going to make payroll, and we need to put the company out, which was obviously really. And again, for me, the losing the business was one thing, but it was one of the worst days of my life to sit in front of those people and tell them that they didn't have their job anymore. That sort of hurt me more, actually, than the business going as such. That was just really hard, and amazing reactions from people as well. Like some people, some people cried, but other people said, "Look, well, are you sure? I mean, I don't mind working for free for a few months. We sort it out." And you're like, well, that's phenomenal, isn't it? That people would respond that way. So that was kind of the worst and the best day of my life in many ways. And I actually had lots of friends at Electronic Arts, and considered to set up again, but there was a great opportunity to go and work with what was EA UK at that time. They were making the Harry Potter games, and they wanted someone to come and run the central technology group. And I did that, and that was super interesting. Got me connected to other central technology groups, and I got to travel around the rest of EA and meet people who are doing amazing work on games like Madden and FIFA. And I would meet developers from Australia, from multiple locations in the US, and from Europe as well. But then after a couple of years of doing that, a friend said to me, "Hey, would you come down to Criterion and cover my sabbatical? I need someone to cover."
And was that part of
and
EA
I stayed for 18 and a half years. So it's quite a long 6 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was Long bought the studio actually. Yeah, it was purchased from Canon actually, and work on the Burnout series and also a first-person shooter called Black. Actually, Black was the first game I worked on, and then Burnout Revenge for the Xbox 360, and then everything since then. More Burnout Paradise and Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, Need for Speed Most Wanted.
I have not played this one. I'm still on the
Battlefields and Battlefront.
Previous one,
and,
Hit.
Most recently, Need for Speed Unbound, which launched last year.
I've not played this one. I'm still on the need to play this one. But it keeps. I mean, when I said, "Oh, I'm going to interview the man who produced Battlefront," and it was, that's super exciting because we do games at home.
Battlefront bigger financially in terms of reach than the film. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how the industry, the whole media has grown and is bigger financially and in terms of reach than the film industry, and yet still feels niche somehow. Like I'm still waiting for our cultural place in the world. I think that's on a par with media, of which the games industry is making more money. So it's interesting how it's evolved. You know, certainly if I think of my generation, will still think of video games as a kid's activity.
Clearly, and now with the rise of esports and everything, it's super interesting.
Age, genders, race,
and now augmented with AI, that's going to be super cool.
Whole phenomenon in itself.
No, we're here to talk about leadership. So thanks for the intro.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Yeah, let's dip a bit deeper into.
We could go down a rabbit hole talking about that, but
your journey as a leader. I mean, you mentioned several times that, you quickly moved to a management role.
Yes.
And can you tell more about that? I mean, what was your first experience there?
Yes. And again, this in the spirit of making things.
How big was the company at the time?
So at Intelligent Games, obviously as a director of the company, and again, this in the spirit of making things up.
Wow,
we were 50 to 60 people.
So you were 23. And you were the director of a company of 60
concurrently, which is crazy to think about now. Even a mobile project would consume all of those people and more. Yeah, with two other people, and trying to learn all kinds of things. I remember going on finance for non-financial directors at the Institute of Directors here in London, and looking around thinking, I'm much younger and not like any of the other people here, but I do need to know this because I've kind of signed up to something I didn't know I was signing up to. But and just doing every role. On one of the games, we did a golf game for Sony, and I, without really questioning it, made myself the producer, the project manager, the tech lead, the game designer, and I managed everyone on the team. And I was the director of the company as well. And, it's just destructive, massively destructive to my mental and physical health, because I couldn't think about anything other than the job and the project, and everything was me, and I had my whole sort of identity wrapped up in it. And that was marriage threatening at the time. It was all consuming.
But I had a discussion with
this is where
another leader,
a mentor, that kindly mentor would have been awesome at that time.
That's episode 2,
maybe
where basically he told me that he didn't realize he was, leading the company, was creating the company from the ground up, so a bit different than you, and but he had to make everything work. So when you are in a very dynamic environment, not a very established company, but something that like yours, like your studio, where basically you have to sometimes go day by day and pay the bills and everything. So you have to do everything. So that's very difficult. Are you a leader in that? Are you managing people in that sense? I mean, do you have time for that? It's just you are in surviving mode mostly, right?
Back in those days, I would say not in the.
Are you managing
sense
people in that sense? I mean, do you have time?
I think
it's just you are in surviving mode.
In back in those days, I would say no, not in the sense that I think of it now. There was no structured feedback in the way that you'd need. You weren't deliberately going on a deliberate path of growing people. You weren't facilitating the development of individuals as people and as
so basically getting shit done. That was
super.
The focus.
Didn't even realize that was a thing at the time. It was just like, we're going to make this video game and it's going to be awesome. Yeah, really. Yeah. And because everyone was in their 20s as well, there was very little expectation of that. People weren't comparing it to other things. They were, they were as excited and passionate about what we're doing as well. I remember one time an engineer called Ben on that golf game, actually, he wanted to put a certain feature into the PlayStation 1 version. And I said, no, we're not doing it. We don't have time left to do it. Because I was also the project manager. And he stayed all night and slept under the desk and put it in the next day. So, but it's in there now, so you can't say there's not enough time to do it. Okay, so that's different to a lot of developments where the job is to stop people putting things into the product that you don't want in there, or you maybe don't think should be in there.
But would you keep all those hats?
Trying to persuade people
as a leader now. You were the producer, the tech leader, the program manager.
Concept.
You were in charge of people. You were probably in charge of signing contracts with
business side. It was amazing. Yeah. It was, the business side of it too. I did want to do all those things, and it was amazing learning. But I wouldn't recommend doing them all at the same time, or that could be a structured development path over a number of years now. But now I wonder how possible it is for someone to do that.
Okay.
Is
that because of the complexity of games
so many more people even to do a relatively simple game on one to ship on one platform?
It's because of
absolutely. The complexity of the games, the scale of assets that have to be built, in terms of 3D modeling and texturing and character animation and audio, and even though lots of those things are quite
so if you knew what you knew now, but you were back in the 80s or 90s when you started
to put those things together and
at same complexity of games, would you do the same? Or
no, it would be a bad decision. No, I mean, Would I? No, I probably would actually, but it would be an equally bad decision, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Because I do remember even on that game thinking I probably shouldn't be the technical lead for this, but I had the sense even then that it's going to be my last chance to do it. I had that sense.
Was it the problem of letting go
to those roles that I was drawn on towards?
It's difficult when you are technical
positions,
to let go.
Did turn out to be true. Yes. Yeah. And also, it's somewhat of, but it's letting go of, it's kind of FOMO, the fear of missing out thing that I had in my, I don't know where that was coming from, but that was just my perception that this was the last opportunity to do it. It wouldn't need to have been, but I somehow had that sense that it was, which did turn out to be true. On the next game, I did less of it. Got myself a little bit healthier. Didn't do all of the design myself. Gave over technical leadership to someone else. And that was an example of some fairly brutal learning going on there.
So a little bit. Oh, okay. So you said the last game that you published. I thought that the last game.
So I suppose actually we probably need to talk about
games.
The road to getting ill a little bit before we talk about that. So I wouldn't. No, so then I joined EA and then moved to Criterion, as I said, and I'm wary, actually. I wouldn't say that it's the environment that made me ill. I don't think that's. I'll tell you why I wouldn't say that. What I would say is it was the perfect environment in which for me to become ill. Because of someone who is drawn like a moth to a flame to taking responsibility, there was a never-ending supply of things to take responsibility for in a studio that was being incredibly successful, was scaling up to do 2 projects at the same time, was full of young, passionate people trying to hit and being successful in achieving really, really high standards and wanting to maintain.
So how is different? Is that different from?
I went into
software development. Is that the
same?
I mean, would you say production of a game?
Where the model
has the most logical.
Well, I would say it is different in games because you've got. I think one of the things that's amazing about games is it has the most logical scientists and the most inspirational creatives working in the same teams, with all the complexity of regular software development as well. And with one of your key metrics on a video game being funness. How fun is it? Which can only be measured subjectively, of course. And very much be measured, but it has to be measured subjectively. It doesn't respond well to being predictable as well.
Okay.
So,
because you said you move into production. How different is that from the previous?
Therefore, types of people together.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Right. So, because I was, like I said, was at Intelligent Games, I just did everything. So I didn't have to work out an organizational structure because it's just me and the team. And now it was very much about the model then, which was very common in the video games industry, is the bulk of the people on the team facilitated the priorities and the vision of a relatively small group of people who owned the direction and the leadership of the video game.
But are they scenarists?
My production leader was between that small group of people who were imagining that future state and so that would be leaders of your craft, so like art, audio, technology, and design and direction as well, and a business leader as well in there. And so it'd be and then though the rest of the team would be told what to do, in effect. So there would be like a control, do this, bring that next increment of the game back to that small group, they review it, and we go around that cycle again. So I'm in between those two things, which turned out to be a ridiculously stressful job to choose, particularly for someone with me. This is what I mean about it being the perfect environment to get ill, because that allows me to make myself accountable for everybody and everything of 250 people for meeting the needs of this small group, and vice versa. I'm trying to get everybody's needs to be met. I mean, it's not a choice I made consciously. If I'd noticed myself making it, I think I may have avoided that scenario. But because I was predisposed to that way, in retrospect, it was inevitable that I would suffer burnout. I already working on a game called Burnout. No, actually, we'd finished Burnout by the time that happened. We were working on Need for Speed, but we had a game called Burnout. So if you believe in nominative determinism, maybe there's something in that. I don't know, but yeah. And the real reason I think of it is I called that model. I call it in the book Mask and Task, and the reason I call it Mask and Task is because I had to put on a mask to go to work every day. And the task bit is telling people what to do. And the thing with that, wearing a mask to work every day is so exhausting, because you take so much energy in trying to be, and my mask was the mask of being all things to all people, which is ludicrous.
Because I mean, so I understand your extreme ownership and
could see it consciously. No one would ever ask
outgoing
you to do that
extrovert that you are. So were you taking on everything? Because I mean, there were some requests coming up and say, okay, I would take care of that, and you didn't delegate to your teams. So were you less taking everything? Because there was some requests coming up and say, okay, I'll take care of that
cognitively.
And then helps.
Yeah, it was less the doing than the cognitive load. That was the real thing as well. So because in this situation now, you effectively have become a translator between all the issues of execution for a large constituency and people doing that, to all the issues of the business and the creative side. And those two things have to effectively, they are in two different languages. They need to be, I mean, they're all in English, but the points of reference are so diverse and complex. I'm pointing myself as the translator between all of those things, which are also moving at different latencies as well. So the creative is updating usually way quicker than the execution. And so they get out of date with each other. The execution is now could be executing something,
but everything would have to go through you
with the creative direction, because that cycle has moved on, and haven't even noticed that there's a difference between the two. So it's really the cognitive load of trying to be everything went through me, pretty much, and so and I designed it that way as well, which is really quite tragic looking back on it, because of this need I had. That's the way I wanted it at the time. And I had lots of talented and good people around me, which were also helping with that process and heavily involved in it. But for me and my expectation I was putting on myself, even if it was if that
how many people
was spread organizationally, I still made myself accountable for everything. So that's what I mean by it was kind of inevitable. You just can't keep that. Then how big would the team have been there? Sort of in the 150 range, something like that. Yeah. 100 to 150, I think. but then wider out into the organization once you include like,
and you're responsible for everything, or just
localization and all the other units you need to make a modern video game. You're responsible for.
Have you read the team topologies?
I shouldn't have been responsible.
It's a great book. It's a really great book, and two consultants actually are helping companies, designing the organization and the concept of loosely coupled teams. So, and the fact that you don't have any bottlenecks or people that are, so defining the interfaces, how teams are interacting and how they can be, how they can move quickly without, impeding others. So, so that's a great book. Really, I mean, it's applicable for software development, but not only. I mean, there are plenty of great learnings from this book. I will share that with you. Because and one of the things that they are mentioning is actually the cognitive load. I mean, the fact that you need to restrain yourself and whenever a problem is too big, you need to divide your team and create more teams to take care of that. And also they are using some psychology studies that shows the Dunbar number. So for sizing the teams, for having high trust teams, and so the fact that you need to limit, but also because you limit the cognitive load of that team, and whenever the cognitive load is too high, then this is the time when you need to split up. But also, because you limit the cognitive load.
It's not really talking about that much as the emotional load.
Then this is the time when you need to split up.
Yeah. Also. I think another factor in there that's not really talked about that much is the emotional load as well. And so if you are going to make yourself accountable for the whole person, then it's not just cognitive, because that sort of suggests the lie that we just think and act, and we don't. We show up as people with emotions and needs, and it affects our performance massively. Of course it does. And that was a big part of where I would inevitably of the inevitability of my move towards burnout, is I was making myself emotionally responsible for so many people as well.
So what do you mean by being responsible emotionally for people? Because you care about them
until retrospectively. So
what do you mean by being responsible emotionally for people? Because
this is actually beyond. Making yourself accountable for their it's actually beyond well-being, actually, for their mental health.
That's
really
interesting. So would you say that it's not your role as a leader to do that, or not to be accountable?
Ease of being, the whole thing, and that.
That's interesting. So you say that it's not the role of the leader to do that, or not to be accountable?
Right. So it's pretty nuanced, I think. So I think that you are definitely accountable as a leader for creating an environment where people can bring them whole selves to work, and where they're comfortable being authentic, when they have. We're talking about psychological safety, really, where, and I think the best definition of that is Amy Edmondson's of people are prepared. People feel safe taking risks in front of one another at work. There's no negative consequence for that. So that definitely is your accountability. You're certainly accountable that people are treated with respect, that people are recognized for their whole self, regardless of their background, their culture, their gender, their sexuality, their age, any of those things. That I definitely think you're accountable for as a leader, but you're not accountable for their, and it's actually absurd to try to make yourself accountable for their personal, emotional variability that we all have. And my experience is that, that will make you ill, actually. They'll you'll put yourself under so much stress that Yeah.
Do you have an example of
you don't
a situation where you take on,
volatile
when people go through a divorce, something like this, you would take it?
Take on example. It would be, yeah, it could be that. Some people would confide in me. Think of a good example. It would be, yeah, it could be that. Some people would confide in me, all kinds of things that were going on. For them personally. And yeah, you kind of take that on and sometimes try to fix that as well. And that's, it's not your role to be other people's therapists as such. You can certainly be good counsel. You can certainly signpost, but it's also dangerous.
Yeah, that's something where there's a risk for me, I guess, because they have a high level of empathy. But what you describe is going a bit forward, and a bit further than the empathy. It's really being, So how do you? For example, fast forward to 2020 with COVID. So many things happened during that time. As a leader, you probably felt compelled to be not the confident, but to make sure that your people were okay. That
So 2020 is interesting, really, because as you said, the pivot point for me was 2012. Your parents developed for me. Yeah. So 2020 is interesting, really, because as you said, the pivot point for me was 2012, and developed the new way of learning, new way of leading for sure, probably a new way of learning too, actually, but certainly continuing commitment to learning. And then COVID comes along and just disrupts. Well, it puts the whole world through social trauma, doesn't it? And certainly disrupts the whole world of work and creates instant remote working. But at that point, I'm equipped with new tools and certainly with more self-awareness. And I have this idea of there being a formula for stress at work, that work stress equals...
Can you define agency?
Accountability minus agency. So if you're trying to keep accountability and agency in balance, basically, in everybody's role, including your own. So the ability to execute on the responsibilities that you have, and that could mean do you have direct influence over certain priorities?
So what Daniel Pink refers to mastery?
Company used the authority of your organizational role. They're all parts of your agency. No, I think that's something different again. Mastery is, are you in a role that is kind of in that spot between what you know you can do and just short of what you know you can't do? That's the mastery zone in there. Whereas agency is like, it's the things you have either direct control or direct influence over, which you need to execute the things you're accountable for. My insight, and you'll probably guess this from where this conversation has gone already, accountability, though, is two things. There's the accountability of the role, what's actually expected of you, and then your personal accountability. What have you made yourself responsible for? And so I'm always looking with people I'm mentoring and coaching for the split between those two things. Because, and you'll see it as like, is that personal accountability being set at a healthy level? What you're asked to do, or I'm going to set mine.
And your agency is low?
Then, now that might be healthy to set it a little bit above what's being asked because you want to grow. But if you're setting it at perfection, as I always want to do, you're going to struggle. Because if you carry on with accountability higher than agency for long enough, you just will burn out. It's just inevitable. So it's something to be super mindful of when designing organizations, not just what you actually.
No, there was a discretion from me because you were talking about how you handle. I mean, we were talking about
so
the difference between empathy and how you deal with people's feeling and yeah. So we were talking about it's good. The different people had found a way.
Yes. And we were talking about COVID, weren't we? So I had these new tools. So when it came to 20, I was good at. I'd found a way of leading compassionately. So if empathy is being aware of other people's struggles and challenges, and compassion is step to wanting to help with them, finding a compassionate way of leading that also included healthy boundaries for me. So I was enjoying my leadership, and I was staying in a really healthy place and growing personally and professionally.
Mm-hmm.
So when COVID came along, it was a lot of what I found was finding ways to manage myself through that process and share those with the team that I was leading. But the one thing I instinctively did, and which turned out to be right, was create as many forums for connection as possible, because that's what came through so loud and clear. Also started doing wellbeing surveys, so I was asking people directly, and so in those surveys it became clear that's what we're all missing, that human connection where we're engaging all our senses face to face with one another. Something really important and magical happens for humans, and taking that away was causing all of us deep angst and problems. So anything we could do to foster connection and new ways of working had to be invented really rapidly as well. So go on that learning journey with everyone. But mainly the first focus was to make sure we stayed connected. And for me to do that in a way that was maintain my boundaries. Although it was actually really, I did end up quite drained after a year had gone on, but I think it was so exceptional situation because it wasn't just work, was it? It was everything, and it was social trauma, and so we were all going through trauma together. I think it was draining. I think in many ways we're still paying the price for it. We're paying the bill for all that time, and probably will be for some time.
Okay, so going back to 2012,
well-being.
This is
establishing.
This is where you
working
have the burnout,
healthy things like that.
Also, the crisis moment.
So going back to 2012.
Broke. This is a very strange feeling. Just completely burnt.
Yeah. So that was like the crisis moment, and just broke effectively. And it's a very strange feeling, actually, of just complete numbness. And that's how I knew. It's strange that it can happen just in one moment, and I can actually remember the moment of a good friend at work just on a walk out to go and get our lunch, and he just said to me, "Are you okay? Don't seem yourself." And just that one question, for whatever reason, was the trigger for me to go, "No, I'm really not, and I'm done." And I just went back into the office, spoke to my then manager, and said, "Can't do it anymore, and I'm going, and I don't really know when I'll be back." And I didn't understand the consequences for that, but I had finally got to the point where I had to do that. And the company were great, actually. They really supported me, and they said, "Just give me your phone, give me your laptop, go and get well. That's your job, get well."
If I may, how did you recognize that this was the moment where it had to stop?
What was therapy and started that work?
He said that because I had this compelling drive to be responsible for everyone's thing.
Yeah.
And it just
I think it was that numbness. I think it was when he said that because I'd had this compelling drive to be responsible for everyone and everything, and it just wasn't there all of a sudden. It just wasn't. And then what I now know is that there's a very physical thing that goes on there, is that your amygdala in your brain, which is like the regulator valve for your emotions just blows and stops doing its job. So that's what the numbness, that's what depression is, all those lack ofs. And until you take some combination of rest and medication, just rest in my case, for it to start doing its job again. And then hopefully you'll start to get well. But I think that's what had happened. That was probably the point at which my amygdala just gave up. But the way it manifested was me not having that usual drive to take responsibility and be accountable for all things. Just wasn't there. So I was like, can't go on.
Trying to compare to other situations where, people
I shouldn't be here,
or myself,
I can't be here, and I shouldn't.
May have resigned from the job and look for another job. How do you make that difference when you are in a situation where I can't bear anymore?
Yeah.
But is that because of the company, because of the environment, or because it's you and you are not? And I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. No, I hadn't stopped loving the job at all. I hadn't stopped loving making video games, and hadn't stopped loving the team either. So it wasn't about wanting to quit the job. I thought it might be the end of the job, which was really frightening, because I thought I might not be even capable of doing it again. But it was a case of now it's a case of, I can see now it's a case of just not being able. Like if I'd have, if it had been a physical thing, and I'd like broken both my arms and I couldn't use the computer, which was key to doing the job, and it took 3 months for them to heal, then I would have taken 3 months for them to heal, wouldn't I? And then I would have come back to work, and that's actually what did have to happen. I had to take 3 months to heal, and then start to come back. But
so okay, let's talk about that. How did you?
Very real awareness that things had to change for me.
What's your journey
had to change the way
since 2012? What were the different steps that you took to get? So like the hero in a story, you have this crisis moment, and then you are on path to coming back. So what was the path? What was the learning moments?
Yeah.
Then you are passed to come back. So what was the?
Yeah. So there was in your movie sense, there was a plot development that was really interesting in that there was a change of leadership at Criterion, and I became part of the studio leadership team, and also we got a chance to sort of rebuild and redefine. For a while, we're supported by Electronic Arts in doing that. And so we went on a period of really rapid experimentation with how we worked, which allowed.
But with the rest of the leadership team aligned with that, with your needs?
How I led and worked within that environment. So the two things were perfectly in sync for me at that time. Yeah, they were like, let's find a better way. Let's find a healthy way. They had different versions to me, but they also had a sort of, they'd found it all challenging. And I guess we were all reaching a life stage where, you couldn't do that, what you could do in your 20s. We had families and other priorities. And so, it was good that we were united in that kind of passion to find a healthy way to still make, world-class, brilliant video games, but do it in a healthy way. There was quite a wide core of people who were really committed to that idea. And so the next few years were like super exciting, as we did a lot of experimentation with how we worked. This is where we got heavily into the Daniel Pink stuff. I was reading Drive at the time, and for me, it was a lot about moving away from that idea of a large number of people execute what the priorities and ideas of a small version, and how do you apply the wisdom of all of the team members to this incredibly complex challenge of making a video game. So that was like a flip, and then and that means everyone, you want people to be engaged and motivated in spades, really, what we call hyper engaged teams. And I don't know what put me onto it, but I read Daniel Pink's Drive at that time, and became quite evangelical about implementing that. And, you know, because everyone was so energized and motivated to try new things, and we were really learning rapidly about what worked and what didn't. And the premise of Pink's book is that there's a gap between what science knows and what business does when it comes to
the best example is sales. I mean,
most of
you get big money if you make your numbers.
You do this and you can have that transaction, whereas actually, right? Yeah. And interestingly, what you're really describing there is a game, and games are there to be played, whereas people are here. They want to show up with their whole selves, and they want to be engaged and motivated by their work. So he says, if it's not that, I mean, you have got to pay people fairly, but then money is not a motivator. So you have to think of money as a hygiene factor, really. Make sure people are paid fairly, and then it's about something else. And it's as he says, it's on autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I added recognition on the front of it, which seemed to complete the picture for me, but also made a much better acronym, I think, because it gives you ramp, and then you can ramp up. So it must be right. I'm really focused on maximizing.
Okay, so I would like to dive deeper into that, because ideas in the book are great, but how you implement that it's the secret sauce that makes things happen. Have you read Turn the Ship Around by David Marquette?
Yeah,
it's such a great book. So, and when I'm listening to your story, I pictured this book because David Marquette.
No, it's been recommended to me before, though.
Kind of submarine.
I'm going to enjoy that.
And he knew everything about submarines, everything. And he was assigned, to take the command of a submarine. So he prepared for 1 year. At last minute, he was assigned to another one, which he knew nothing about. He knew nothing about this submarine, how things work, because he was in control. He wanted to be in control of everything. So suddenly he had to let go. Mm-hmm. And the book is great. It's such the second book that he wrote. Oh yeah. And that crew was the worst in terms of grades by the US Navy and
after
so on.
He got through the fear,
and
like I said,
turned the ship around, and that team became the best, and he created leaders who became who created great teams in return and so on. So such a great book. And the other book that he wrote is Leadership is Language. And again, great book. Yeah. I mean, really encourage you to read this. So going back to the secret sauce, how do you do this? Right. I mean, so you recognize that sounds like a good story. You have recognition, you have mastery, purpose, and mastery, purpose. I'm missing one. Autonomy. Yeah, autonomy.
So autonomy, I think, is the big one.
And autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Yeah. So let me talk about those a little then. So autonomy, I think, is the big one and the most frequently misunderstood, I think, is I talked about autonomy over the 3 T's, so team, task, and technique, over who you work with, what you work on, and how you work on it. But the really important thing, and this is where I've noticed it being misunderstood, it's you're trying to maximize the autonomy for your people that you're leading over the 3 T's, which is not 100%. It's highly unlikely to ever. There's certain circumstances I'll maybe talk about in a minute where it could be 100% for a very constrained period of time. So it isn't. So you can work with whoever you want. It isn't you can work on whatever you want, and it isn't you can work however you want. So let's put that aside, but it does mean that isn't going to be entirely dictated to you as well. And by a process of collaboration and examining how the whole system of your business works, you can actually, in my experience, you find that the autonomy you can give individuals is more than where you start at the start of that analysis. So for things, we went quite extreme on the team size, where we would just show up at the start of each 6-week phase of development and say to people, here's all the priorities for the next 6 weeks. Which one do you want to work on? And literally just run around now. If you go and stand over there, if you want to work on that, go and stand over here if you want to work on that. And that's super powerful. But also I think it's a problem when you go to scale that, because you need teams to be more predictable for scoping and predictability and all those other good project management metrics. So fine in a discovery phase that we happen to be in, but you need to reduce that. So you actually have to reduce people's autonomy over. They can't choose any team now, but you probably find there are points where there is a choice, like 2 or 3 individuals. It can be, you could be on any of these 3 teams and we can swap it around, and there's an open conversation around moving either from a phase to phase basis, swapping with someone else on the team. Those sorts of things is an example of where there might be autonomy over team in that way. Task is similar. So what you do, task is really interesting, I think, from a growth point of view as well, because if you think about it from a risk management point of view, what you want everyone to do is what they've done before.
Yeah.
And what they definitely know how to do, the things they're expert in. That's the least risky thing. But that's also go back to that mastery thing. That's the first circle. That's the things you know how to do. So there's no growth for people if they're just doing that. So how do you find that sweet spot in people's roles where it fits the needs of the business and the project, but also allows them to grow? You have to get to know the people fundamentally at a personal level. And that's the mastery slot. And then what did I get to? Team task technique. Oh yeah. So how you do it. It's really important about how you express the work that needs to be done. And in my experience, goal writing, people are really poor at it. What they write is actually instructions as a rule. And that's not a goal. I want you to describe the benefit you want, not the work to be done. And if you can free those up, and I worked up this whole workshop, actually based on this mad dream I had, but I've worked up this workshop which I've run multiple times, and to try to engender this idea of how do you break away to even from understanding the work to the benefit you're trying to achieve, because that then frees up that being achieved in many ways. So I think the best example I've come across for this is, so an instruction would be build me a ladder, whereas a goal would be retrieve some things from a high shelf. Now, the reason I like that example is there's multiple ways to get things from a high shelf. You could just find a really tall person, or you could get some acrobats who can stand on each other's shoulder if it's really high. And you probably don't need to build a ladder, is the point. You can reduce the actual work that needs to be done. So it's so the work really does have to be expressed in that way if people are going to have autonomy over technique. So that's the autonomy piece. Maximize, unlikely to be 100%. I did say there was one exception, and that was having a day in each, day or sometimes 2 in each 6-week cycle, where you say to people, now just do anything you want for these 2 days that you think helps you or the company, and that classic sort of
That's what and Daniel Pink described it
all kinds of
at Canva, the FedEx days, and
you have to share it with at least one person at the end of the
and Google is known for that as well, and a couple of other companies. Yeah.
And so,
FedEx, always deliver. Yeah, which is great. Yeah, that's interesting. And so, and that's then mastery. We've talked. That's the autonomy piece. Mastery we've talked about. Purpose is really interesting, actually, because purpose is the need for people to attach their ideals to something that's bigger than themselves, which I think people are increasingly looking for at work, which they don't find in the old institutions that used to provide them.
Like in millions, No.
It's not the business purpose. So your purpose is not 4% extra, whatever. That, I mean, not that those things aren't important, because of course they are to the function of your business, but in terms of through the engagement and motivation lens, it's not that. For us, it was, you alluded it to your question earlier, this idea that we could make amazing things that people would love interacting with, but also do it in a healthy way. And
so how do you define that? Because I've run a couple of workshops like this. It's difficult because
us together.
And no. How do you find the purpose within the group? I had an interview with Franco Banfi.
How do you define healthiness? Do you mean?
Where we discussed exactly that. He works for Decathlon, the sports good, company, and they work as groups on defining visions like this and purpose. So they have a purpose for the company, which is well known. Right. It's they want to make sports available to the many. That's their purpose, and that's a great mission. But regularly they review that purpose as a company altogether. As in all together. So the 100,000 people that they have in the company. So
my answer is that the mission is all the same thing.
Okay, so my answer to that is that the mission and the purpose are probably not the same thing from the individuals working their point of view. And the way you present your purpose and values is probably the opposite way around to how you discover them. So what I mean by that is you would typically say, so in that example that I gave, we're here to make world-class video games in a healthy way. That's our purpose that we rallied around at that point. And from that, we have these 4 or 5 core values expressed as terms of behavior. Then I break those further down into principal behaviors, because culture is behavior, right? It's how we show up at work every day. And then from there into what I would call observable behaviors. So, and you and I like to express them as it's not this, but this kind of thing. It's not telling people to do, but establishing goals expressed as benefits. That would be an observable behavior. So if you did see someone telling people what to do, you would say, in our culture, we don't do it like that. We do measuring observable, measuring, best that we can observe it together. So that's how you would typically present it. I actually think the way you establish it is complete reverse of that. So there's a workshop I run and is one of the offerings of the game consultancy of establishing your core values based on your best day at work. So you get a group of people together and they just talk about what their best day at work is. And you establish from that how people were behaving when you were at your best. From there, you get your themes. From there, you get your principal behaviors. And then that's really interesting point where you can say, so what is it then that we value? What is the common thing that we value that is why these behaviors create our best day? And then at that pinnacle, you can actually, I think it will become obvious to you what your real purpose is. And you've discovered it from a process of mass collaboration around what the best day at your company looks like. And I'm confident it wouldn't be what you thought it was going to be when you set out on that process. So it's a really interesting process. It's sort of like, my premise is you already know what your values are. You just probably haven't expressed them, or still
we have people
from the collective wisdom of the group, which is like I said,
but okay.
For me,
thank
and
you
how
for that.
Now.
I'm sure that you have read Simon's.
yeah. Somebody really liked that idea.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Big fan of.
He's a great storyteller as well. I mean, the way he talks about. I mean, I learned about David marketing and leadership around because of
selling his own.
Thanks to Simon Sinek
and helping you sell.
He talked about it in Leaders It Lasts. Yeah. And but the Infinite Game also is about purpose and defining this purpose, or how do you call it? How do you call that? Start with why it was more about you. I mean, although he was discussing about Apple and
he's
Wright brothers.
Start with why, isn't he? And people,
but it was really from those people. And then, but in the Infinite Game, he talks about how do you call that? It's the from the.
He's very good at distilling, but he does talk about purpose, doesn't he? So you're not just here to make.
No, we're not. Yeah,
he is very good at distilling. He does talk about purpose, doesn't he? So we're not just here to make good computers, and actually it's a great expression of define the benefit as well, define the outcome, not the output. So don't just describe the work, but describe the impact it has on people, I think is the core point he's trying to get at there as well. I think a really powerful purpose will unite what you're doing for your customers with what you're doing for your people as well. So the video games are still really important to us as an expression of that team's work, and the healthy part is really important for our people. I would argue ultimately that it's important because I think every game you make is a reflection of who you are when you make it in some way. But to keep those two things embodied in the powerful purpose, I think
that really makes the difference.
Resonate.
It's not easy though, and
your wider organization.
When I joined a team some years ago, and I struggled to define that. I mean, with the team to define that purpose, it was really hard. I mean, maybe because we were very distributed and we could not meet because of COVID. So, but because I came. I mean, the team before that I created in another company, I spent a lot of time with my team defining what were our values and our mission and what we wanted to do, and team size was great. We were 10 people, and we were moving super fast and delivering, and we were all going in the same direction. I didn't have to say anything. We knew exactly where we were going. So everyone, and I have a very diverse team in terms of skill set and background. So that was cool because everyone would take ownership and drive things. But when I moved to the other team, when I moved to another company, and then I had to lead this team, and that I did not hire for. Also, I inherited from a that.
Much more common situation, right? So
I struggled
you struggled with
run the workshop that would lead us to that. I didn't mean to create that, define a purpose for us, but I wanted to use the recipe that I used previously in my other team, and that worked pretty well. And I was so energized after that series of workshop where we defined that, and we got things done, and that was really a thrill. But when I moved to this new company and we couldn't meet in person, I think that was probably the problem, because for 1 year I've never met the people.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think especially for something like that, because you are asking people to share, not just their professional selves at that point, but their, why are you here? No, obviously you need to get paid and all of those things, but why are you really here? That's where the gold is for that, or that purpose stuff. And that's a vulnerable act, to reveal yourself and that to people. And so it's much easier to create the safety for that to happen when we're all physically together. It just is. And I think the other thing that was going on during COVID there is anxiety. Anxiety destroys trust. Anxiety is the biggest trust killer there is. And there was anxiety everywhere, wasn't there? We were actively being told that every other human is a potential threat to you.
So,
and they were actually.
Maybe I wanted to do too early
pre-vaccine.
That maybe that
was the case. So there was a lot
going
on.
You need to create that tough trust environment for that type of discussion to happen. So there's a mix of, you can't show up day one and ask people to be vulnerable because they don't know each other. So what is the recipe to success for this type of?
You can't show up day one, and so
no.
So is what is the recipe to success? Need to
yeah. So I think the number one thing is the leaders need to model the behavior. Now, I know that kind of sounds obvious, but it's such a fundamental truth for me of leadership of, the best way to build trust is to act in a trustworthy way over and over and over again. Unfortunately, one failure is very expensive in trustworthiness. And one perceived failure as well is the issue as well. But then, so if you want vulnerability, you're going to have to demonstrate vulnerability. And that is quite hard for leaders as well, because the received wisdom is one of strength, and that vulnerability, particularly for men, unfortunately, equals weakness. And most cultural conditioning will tell you that you're not supposed to be weak, you're supposed to be strong. So there's a lot of sort of conditioning to fight there. But Brené Brown does a fantastic job of explaining this in that wonderful, I think it's the most watched TED talk there is, actually, where she breaks it down, and she points out it's the birthplace of human connection and creativity and loads of other good things. So there's big rewards for vulnerability, but not easy. And
I think one of the point where sometimes I'm struggling.
Also, I think a great
actually
precursor
what you,
to trust.
I mean, in your presentation that you did in I think in San Francisco, practice 3 patience grasshopper. I'm struggling with that. I mean, repeating myself several times. Hard. I mean, and I maybe it's a bias I have, but I have a great memory. So when you tell me something, usually I would keep it fresh in my mind. But I see the need for repeating. But I need to be to be better at that, because I because people are not necessarily in the same meetings that I am in, and they don't have all the context. So whenever I say something, they may think about it, and then since they don't have necessarily all the context, they may not understand all the what it means and why we should do it. So we say, okay, you said that, but so I think that's something I need to work on.
And it is what it is hard, and we should do it. So I think that's a very
it is hard, right? Because we're in we're business leaders who are in a results-driven environment with lots of very real metrics and that make a difference to, well-being and growth and safety and success and all those things. So they're not. That's still real. All of that stuff, and to wait, which is what patience means, and not intervene, can feel to be inactive when everything in you is telling you to be active, is quite a difficult decision to make.
Yeah.
And of course it is, like all things, leadership is as a judgment call that you're being paid to make. Is this now the time to intervene or not? And what I try to hold myself accountable is just to go one round further than I think of patience, or maybe 2 rounds or 3 rounds further than I think for patience, because the alternative is you're going to tell people, you're going to give people the answer effectively as a leader. And there is absolutely a time for that, letting people struggle for something where the answer. There's definitely a point where you're not serving them by withholding your wisdom and insight and knowledge. But there's also a point where providing it too early, you're going to miss the fact that they've got a better solution than you, or that there's a third better solution than either yours or mine. You're going to miss that. So it's a judgment call tutored by experience that, of course, you'll get wrong from time to time.
Yeah,
when to
that's
intervene
true.
And when not.
Yeah.
But it's joyful when you're just thinking about intervening, and then there's a breakthrough.
Yeah. I think
so
I'm getting better at that.
But
and what I meant,
it's not what I thought it was going to be. It's better than I thought it was going to be.
You are going to be repeating yourself. That's the piece. That's the piece where I need to work on my patience, because I'm not good at repeating myself, and I should do it more. I know I should do it more.
Yes.
Because, sometimes people don't listen because there's something else happening, and and
there is one I should do initially, or it comes with listen.
I do think there is one technique I found that it comes from Miller. Miller's the number is apparently it's the most quoted psychology experiment about it's 7 plus or minus 2 things that we can keep in our short-term memory, right? Miller's magic number. And so I think I keep seeing it pop up in many other things. So maybe that's one of the reasons we have to keep repeating ourselves. But the thing I found that's made it more likely to be 5 than 9, so minus 2 plus 2 to the 7, is if you can make the message personal. So, for example, you're sending something out by way of your communication mechanism to a group of people and saying, do you agree with this proposal?
Okay.
You're probably not going to get a response to that so quickly or readily as if you can say, here's the thing that directly affects you. Do you agree with that? No, because it's going to happen. Then you may not have to do the second, third, and fourth iterations on top of the 3 or 4 you've done.
Thing I need to do more of.
That seems to be.
I wanted to move to your 7 key pillars of liberated leadership. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so this was I said to
when you move to mask and
your
task. 7 key pillars.
So this was then, like I said to you, the old model was this mask and task, and this was a model of healthy leadership for me, and a way of applying the wisdom of the team to the problem. So it being about, still recognizing you have hierarchy, that doesn't go away, but applying the collective wisdom more effectively, and therefore going quicker and being as well as being more engaged and motivated. So I replaced the old method with some deliberate phases that would typically start with focus and presence. So focusing on now, because especially in video game, but I would imagine in all projects, it's so easy for the destination to cloud and encourage bad decisions about what we do right now. Whereas the only thing we really control is what we do right now. And of course, you've got to have a project plan and all of those good things. But bringing that focus to right now is quite liberating for people. From there, a deliberate step about, so that's practice number 1. For practice number 2 is to inspire belief widely.
Yeah.
And it's funny how that step gets missed out.
Is it linked to the purpose?
So many times. And so of just assuming that people believe in what you're doing or
you probably did something to the purpose.
I think so. I think it can, your purpose is one of those, but the belief is, you're probably doing something innovative. You're probably doing something in most of our business lives, regardless of our industry right now. We're trying to do something to gain a competitive advantage that hasn't been done before or reach a standard we haven't achieved before. So you have to convince people and yourself that it might be possible. So you can point to why you succeeded before, and you may be looking at, some ways things are set up that would maybe detract those beliefs, and don't deny them, but still inspire that belief. And I think having a quiet ego is really important in that so you can listen to others and find out what their issues are. And this brings us on to trust. Trust can, with the attendant psychological safety, we've just talked about it extensively. Inside that belief will allow you to move on to that thing I talked earlier about, setting that ambition in the mastery zone, where we're managing the outcome and not the output, and getting really rapid feedback on what we're achieving. And then that's both on the work and as people as well. So, always recognizing that we're developing a product, but we're developing each other as well. And then as you learn about what you've achieved in this latest iteration of the work, in our case, a game, it's how you respond to what you discover. And do you respond to it with an aha or oh no? You've got to. There's always going to be times when you hit oh no, right? But trying to maximize the times you can meet that discovery with an aha. And my mantra for that is the only true failure is failure to learn. So we can fail as many times as we like, as long as we learn and grow from those failures, and limit the number of times we're having the same failure. Hopefully never, right? Even that might not be achievable, but that's what we're looking for in that. And from that discovery, we can be back to the start of the cycle of focusing on now. And what that does for me, rather than the mask and task, because wearing a mask to work that I told you was so painful, means that personal authenticity can underpin this whole style of leadership.
Talked about this thinker,
which is a tricky one. Should we get into personal authenticity? This is a big one for me, because I think a lot of people are, when I talked about this thinker, of what I mean by that being that you've got some version of yourself to which you're being authentic, or which you're being true. I personally don't believe that. I think there's sort of past you, the accumulation of all the experience you've ever had. There's this moment, as you show up, and that's hugely variable. You might be having a good day, a bad day. You might be tired. You might have just spent 11 hours on a plane or something, And then there's also, and Hermione Ribera in a TED Talk, The Authenticity Paradox, does a great job of talking about this. There's your aspirational self, or the yourself you're trying to become. The growth you're trying to achieve suggests that you're trying to be different than you are today. So which one of those are you trying to be authentic to? And so that, to me, debunks the idea of a single self to which you're trying to be true. So what do I mean by personal authenticity? For me, it is you are, from all of that, you can edit the person you are on that day. So performance is still valid. The best part of yourself that you want to present for the purposes of that context that you're in. But no, you can't add things to that aren't in there. You can't pretend that you're something that you're not, or most importantly, from my point of view, that you've had an experience that you haven't
if I summarize,
had. And you
means that we have different facets, and you decide to expose some of the features, some of your features, depending on the context, depending on but it's always you.
Yeah, I'm waiting. That's very sure. That's what it's found. And you decide to expose some of the features you're honest of your own.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always you, because it's always founded in what you've experienced, and you're honest and truthful.
Reminds me of your episode with your guest.
Integrity is non-negotiable. We all have to do the right thing, even when no one's looking, which can be hard, especially when. Yes, indeed, and then the other thing, and I think Carrie said this as well, having a core set of personal values that are your personal non-negotiables. They're a tremendous guide for difficult situations you find yourself over time. So that allied with a commitment to growth, to understanding yourself, developing your self-awareness, doing that work on yourself.
Yeah, self-awareness is a big thing. I mean,
growing.
I mean, it's funny because Sam mentioned
that's my definition of personal.
The episode that you listen to talk about that
all
as
starts
well,
there, doesn't it?
And another one, Daryl talk about it, and I think what you described in the first part of the episode, where you have this ownership, you take accountability and so on. That's all about self-awareness. That
and now I didn't have it. Yeah, down, and then the it's all about therapy.
Yeah, and that I didn't have it in that road down, and then through some work with a very good therapist and a great coach as well. I helped with that, and then going on my own journey, discovering mindfulness helped me massively.
Focus on now
with that of becoming self-aware as well as being present and focusing on what's happening to me right now was massive for that. Yeah, it's huge, and the antidote to anxiety. And anxiety is fear of an imagined future, and depression is punishment for a perceived past as well. So, it's incredibly powerful to focus on now as well. But it does seem to be an unfortunate truth of the human condition that self-awareness only really starts from trauma. So, you seem to have true self-awareness of the type we're talking here. It takes trauma for us to really get on that journey.
So for those who can which we can save the trauma, what would be the
let's not go
recommendations?
That's for sure.
It's a great way in which we can save the trauma. What would be the search?
Well, I would say a mindful practice is a great way in. I mean, I think the work Google have done on the Search Inside Yourself program, making the connection between mindfulness as a training tool for emotional intelligence, I think that's a fantastic insight. And, not least because emotional intelligence from Goleman's work, is most likely to be the indicator of high performance if everyone's at the same hard competence level. It's emotional intelligence that will single out the really high performers, the superstars. So it's a smart business move to develop your emotional intelligence as well, which is going to start from self-awareness, from which mindfulness is the best.
What do you think about AI in this context?
I'd advise anybody to embrace that. At least give it a go. See if it's a thing for you.
What do you think about the AI in this question?
So I actually think of AI right now as the equivalent of the loom in the last industrial revolution. So it's like this tool. I think of it as a tool that's going to revolutionize how multiple business work to do, that will give us opportunities as humans to redefine our society. Now, will we take the opportunity to make it better for all people, or will we just be super competitive like we did last time and still like work a 5-day week and be super competitive with one another? I don't know. But it could be very freeing to create the space for that kind of inner work that I think's so important. I don't know whether
at the same time that we're talking about AI, there's the rise of responsible AI. So big companies are talking about that actively. I think that's quite interesting. But I'm really deep into AI at the moment. I mean, since ChatGPT, basically, because it's amazing, and with as a leader, there's so much you can learn from it. I mean, that can augment you, and as a leader, I wonder whether we will have a leaderless type of work environment at some point. If you give true autonomy and people are able to get mastery, and you decide altogether on the purpose and the way you go, and if you have AI that helps you to look at the metrics, look at the environment, say, okay, you are still in the same direction, so go, you can go, or no, you need to direct, which a leader is, or maybe a manager, more roughly. Well, that's so the AI could replace managers because that's sticking to the compliance, basically.
I think so. I think
but I wonder for the, because that's
doing things right rather than doing the right things. I think it depends what your definition of leadership is. I think I like the definition of servant leadership, which inspires my model of liberated leadership, being find out what people need and get it for them. Now, the reason I like that is because it's need, not want. It's not about finding out what everybody wants and getting it for them. That's a different thing altogether. That's a servant, not a servant leadership, I would suggest. And from that, it implies judgment. So I think the currency of leadership is decision making and judgment, and that's the service that as a leader you often provide is a decision. And we talked earlier about finding that tipping point of intervention being a key judgment call, but also so that is a key service. But the other part of it is this inspiration and recognition that comes for building this trust and belief that I just talked about. Is so inherently human. It's hard for me to believe that an AI could replace that. Although I am mindful of, if you don't think your job could be replaced by a robot, you just don't understand as well. So we'll see. But Kevin Kelly's work in The Inevitable, he talked about this idea of centaurs. So AI-driven robot plus human is going to be more effective than robot or human alone. And so maybe as curators of the robots, we have the opportunity as people to maybe create more space to focus on
that's a good one.
Things that
I like it.
Matter so much, these human things.
Okay, so we are reaching the end of the episode. So
growth and development.
How do you keep learning?
That's my optimistic version of the future, anyway.
Just like to say, okay, so it's about people and their experience.
I just intensely curious about people and their experience and comparing it to mine. So just, I mean, I've been doing a lot of answering questions today, but asking a lot of questions, and to which I really want to know the answers as well. You know, how did this go for you? does this seem true to you? It seems true to me, and trying to work these things out with collaboratively with people. I guess it comes down to my outgoing extrovert thing is where so much of the learning and the growth is, and and having the humility to realize that you're never going to be. Is it humility? But I find it reassuring to know that you're not the finished article. You can't ever be the finished article, because is this it? I don't want this to be it. I want to know more. I want to try and improve some of the things that haven't gone so well. I want another iteration all the time of all the things I've learned and
listen to.
I just find people so interesting that and their experiences, and so much wisdom and knowledge out there to be shared and read. And
so we mentioned a lot of books, but would you have one in particular that you would recommend to someone, to anybody?
I'm really drawn to it.
Or it could be other resources, TED Talk, or. So we mentioned a lot of books. You have one.
It depends on I'm a big believer in me.
Well, yeah, I think I would say it depends on. I'm a big believer in meet people where they are. So it would depend what stage you're at, and
the YouTube's
and what your needs are at the time. So at a personal level, I would say a YouTube search for "This Is Water" by David Foster.
Okay.
David Foster Wallace commencement speech he gave in terms of a call for self-awareness and presence is incredibly powerful. I can rarely watch it without crying. It's not least because of his personal experience as well, which I'll let the listeners go on their own journey of discovery with. That's something amazing. I think as a book about leadership, I would probably actually say Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. I think she puts a case for leading as a full human very articulately. And I find so much of what she says resonating with how I think about that. I think those two I would give, but there's so many great ones out there.
All right. How can we hire you for coaching?
Go with John Kabat-Zinn, Full Catastrophe Living, or something like that. Just
How can we hire you for coaching?
Yes. So at my website, www.thegameplanconsultancy.co.uk, you can go to my contact page and connect with me from there. I'd love to meet teams, video games, other industries, people doing complex and amazing things.
In the UK or
new ways to lead, new ways to operate that creates hyper-engaged teams to deliver world-class results.
Yeah,
I'm super excited about that. I'm up for traveling. I think a lot of the work, as we discussed, probably does need to be done.
And last question:
some things.
What other leaders should I interview next?
Remotely, but
who would you recommend?
UK based, but I'm also up for traveling as well.
There's a guy called Remy.
What other leaders?
Ooh. So there's a guy called Rami Ismail who is a massive advocate for getting opportunities for developers from underrepresented cultures an opportunity to get their work out to the world. And he at Game Developers Conference does a talk every year where he spotlights them. It's just one of the most powerful things I've ever been to. So I think he'd have a really interesting
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for all this time with us today. And
enjoy
meeting me in London.
Hearing about from the video game industry.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. And looking forward to reading your book.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Interesting and stimulating conversation. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you so much. And looking forward to reading your book and reading its release.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
You stayed until the end. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Paid Forward Society. If you enjoyed it,
please subscribe and share it with at least 2 people who would benefit from this discussion. Your support helps me reach more people and make a greater impact. You can also help me get discovered by leaving a 5-star rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. I appreciate your support and look forward to continuing this journey with you. Bye.